Go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for joining us today for this JMCC webinar. That's a little non-traditional. It's not going to be entirely a scientific talk, but a great opportunity for us to promote the upcoming 2022 ISHR World Congress in Berlin. My name is Erik Blackwood. I'm the chair of the World Congress ECI Committee, and my co-moderator today is Tham, and he's my co-chair for the committee from the Baker Heart and Diabetes Institute. So as the slide sees, or as you can see on this current slide, the upcoming World Congress is June 12th through the 15th. We are going to be posting updates here very frequently, both on the World Congress website that's listed here, as well as our ISHR ECI webpage that will send out the link later. And so be prepared, we'll be sending out emails to the listserv so you can get all of the exciting updates. So as the ECI committee was originally formed, just a little over a year ago now, our main two initiatives were or I guess three initiatives were one, to navigate the current pandemic situation. And I'm sure a lot of you have questions about how that will, the World Congress will be affected by that. And I'll go ahead and say that we as a committee have been working very closely with the executive committee headed by our president, Thomas Eschenhagen, and our local organizing committee headed by Dr. Burkhard Piest as to how the current World Congress may shift leading up. And if anyone hasn't seen the recent email that came out, I think 30 minutes ago from Leslie Loba of a survey of gauging interest in attending the World Congress, please check it out. If you haven't received it, please feel free to email me and I can forward it to you about whether you'd be interested in attending. We did also send out a poll at the end of last year to all our ECIs, and we did receive an overwhelming excitement for submitting abstracts and attending, which is great for us. And we're hopefully looking forward to a fully in-person World Congress this coming June. Other than that, our goals were to really unite the international conference and promote the careers and science of our early career investigators. And so with that today, we're rolling out two large initiatives that we're excited to share with you today. The first of which being the main topic of today's talk, and that is this new, what we're calling the ISHR Visiting Research Fellowship, previously known the Travel Bursary Program. So this is separate from funds allocated from ISHR to individual sections to allow for travel to the World Congress to present abstracts to ECIs. Separate from that is this Visiting Research Fellowship with an application process that you'll hear about today, where an ECI can spend up to a week with a host lab in the European section to learn a new technique, skill, or simply stage in a new environment, which would be a lot of fun. So we have speakers today, two of which are previous awardees, and we're excited to have them here, and one who's an extremely well-traveled and excellent ECI representative for us. So we're excited to hear from all of them. And so with that, the main overview of this Visiting Research Fellowship and what it means to be part of it, we're going to have, again, as I said, all of this published on our ECI webpage, and you'll see it in email form by Leslie. But mainly the eligibility for an ECI that's deemed by ISHR overall is no more than 8 years post-terminal degree. And we are, of course, taking into account time off for starting a family and things of that nature. So this is a general rule of thumb, and the award will be a successful. Applicants will be awarded funds, as I said, for up to 1 week for travel and accommodation, room and board, staying with that host lab. The applications will go live February 1st, and you'll see that email, as I said, and the tentative deadline for now will be March 1st, 2022. And with that, I will hand it over to Keat.
Thanks, Erik. So our first speaker today is Jim Bell. Jim Bell currently lectures at the La Trobe University in Melbourne, Australia, and he is the newly minted head of the Cardiac Disease Mechanisms Lab, where his current research focus is on the influence of cardiac adiposity on arrhythmia vulnerability. So Jim has had a long involvement in both the local ISHR and also international sections, and is currently actually one of the ISHR MCI representatives. So Jim was awarded a visiting fellowship during World Congress in San Diego. And so we will hear from him now. If you could maybe share your screen, Jim.
Thank you, Keat. Yeah, let me just share this. Okay. All right, should be able to see my screen there. Yeah. Yes, okay. All right, well, thank you, Keat, and also to Erik for the invitation to speak to you guys today. I'm quite passionate about this travel bursary, actually. This goes back to right at the beginning of when the travel bursary started off in 2013, going back to actually when the ECI or ECR committee really started up on a world level within the ISHR. Back in 2013, my research interest was, one of them was about how CAM kinase 2, how that's involved in ischemia reperfusion injury. And the bursary at the time was newly established. It hadn't been done before. We had a committee that came up with some ideas, some initiatives, and one of those was this travel bursary, the idea to really try and connect different ECR from across the different sections to new places based around those the World Congress. So in 2013, the ISHR World Congress was in San Diego. And I put in an application to take up one of these bursaries. I know now Erik was just saying that the name slightly changed, but it's basically the same sort of thing. And Joan Heller-Brown was actually the hosting academic researcher for the meeting in San Diego. So it actually fit very nicely. Joan is certainly a world leader in the CAM kinase 2 field, as many of you will know, and is a very active member of the society. So initially, well, the idea was that the bursary would be for visiting a lab in the sort of more immediate region of Southwest USA, sort of San Diego and surrounding areas. And so one of the first things that I did was to initially identify any labs that are relevant within that area. Fortunately, there was an awful lot of them. And then start contacting these people. It certainly wasn't as well organized as it is now, where you now have a list of host labs that are willing to take people on. And so I contacted Joan, and multiple emails went back and forth. She agreed to host me visiting, and we also mapped out the purpose of the meeting, or sorry, the purpose of the visit, and some specific aims. And I think that's quite important for one of these lab visits, because if you can really map out before you get there what you really want to get out of it, then you'll come away from it with a lot more than if you just turn up and sort of wing it as you go. So one of the big reasons why I wanted to undertake one of these bursaries was to firstly experience a completely different lab environment. I had actually done my PhD in London, and then moved to Australia immediately after that. But I'd never actually visited a lab in the US, and certainly not quite such a high profile lab that was focused on an area of research that I was then working on. And I also was wanting to learn a specific new technique, and that was a radioassay for measuring CAM kinase 2 activity. And that was very much relevant to my research at the time. So really the host lab was perfect what I was looking for, and we had agreed that I'd visit the 2 weeks immediately before that World Congress in San Diego. So what did I do whilst I was there? Well, the first thing was being in an international lab and interacting both with a leading principal investigator, but also the lab as a whole within my field. Part of the activities that I undertook whilst I was there, I was able to present my research to the lab and to some of the extra department members that had an interest in CAM kinase 2. And that was really helpful, actually, because I was able to receive feedback from them. They had a far sort of longer term knowledge of the field, and really gave me a different perspective on the research that I was undertaking and how I could move that forward. I also took the initiative to shadow different members of the lab, to really kind of go around the lab and discuss their research, understand their backgrounds, see one or two of them actually doing their experiments. And that was really useful, really interesting to see just basically how different labs work. But the main activity that I was there for was to learn a new technique. As I mentioned, I worked closely with Charlie Gray, who was a PhD student in Joan's lab at the time. And obviously this is a far younger, skinny version of myself. And yeah, it was really enjoyable. I thoroughly enjoyed working with Charlie. He was an excellent host, and we worked very closely with each other every day, and undertook several experiments together. And I got to a bit of San Diego, which was really excellent. San Diego was a great city. I ate a lot of burritos, which I think was maybe the end of, or the beginning of that skinny person slightly disappearing. I went to a baseball game, see the Padres, generally just rented a car over the weekend, drove around San Diego. It was a really excellent cultural experience, and also just living in a different city for those 2 weeks. So my final slide, I'll just point out what the outcomes are, both in the immediate and the longer term. So firstly, it was, for me, a really excellent academic experience. Made new connections, learned new things. It was an exchange of technical and intellectual expertise. So it was, firstly, it was really excellent to be, as I say, to be able to present my work, to be able to learn a new technique. But also, in a follow-up to that, we were able to exchange some expertise we had with some protein expression studies for the CAM kinase 2 that we shared with Joan and her lab. So it was a great initiative to get us actually sort of conversing and interacting with our research. And as I mentioned, it was a really exciting cultural experience. Really enjoyed my time there. In the longer term, actually my student, my PhD student, Gabe Bernasocki, he was fortunate enough to take one of these bursaries up at the meeting in 2016, Argentina. And he worked for a couple of weeks in Martin Villa-Petrov's lab at La Plata. That in itself was, I think, a really excellent, they do some excellent work again on CAM kinase 2, and certainly a real cultural experience for him being in Argentina. And it really opened my eyes to the benefits of international placements. And I think maybe one or two of the next speakers will talk more about that. But basically, what can I learn that will really expand not only my research, but also life experiences. So I would thoroughly recommend undertaking one of these bursaries, applying for it. Being able to do this in Germany, across Europe, is a really excellent opportunity. I really thank ISHR World Council for continuing to support this over the years. And if you are ever interested in having a research and culture experience down in Melbourne, I'd always be very happy, whether it's connected with the ISHR and future meetings or independent of that, and my details are down there. So with that, I'll pass over, and I'm happy to answer any questions either now or later.
Cool, thanks, Jim. I think that was a very nice, succinct sharing of your experience. So next we have Deli. Deli Zhang is an assistant professor in, I'm going to get this wrong and butcher it, Wageningen University and Research in the Netherlands, where her research focus involves studying aspects of the mitochondria and atrial fibrillation pathogenesis and cardiac arrhythmia. So Deli was awarded a visiting fellowship in 2019 during the World Congress in China. And so I will cue her in now to share her experiences.
Can you see my screen? Hello, I hope you can hear me.
Yep.
Okay, good. Yeah, first of all, thank you for the invitation. I'm very happy to share my lab visit experience immediately after the ISHR World Congress in 2019 in Beijing. And so as Keat already mentioned, I'm an assistant professor from Human and Animal Physiology group in the Wageningen University, located in the Netherlands. And before I share the experience, I would like to give you a short introduction on my research background that also explain why I choose that lab for visit. So I have a long-term research interest in atrial fibrillation, and I did my PhD on this topic in University Medical Center in the Groningen, in the Netherlands. And thereafter, I did 2 postdocs also on the topic of atrial fibrillation. And during my postdoc at Free University Medical Center in Amsterdam, I visited, I got the bursary to visit the lab in Beijing. And from the end of 2019, I started to become a more independent researcher. I applied for tenure track position and moved to Wageningen University. And within the Wageningen University, we have a research theme, which is nutrition and health. I'm now leading a small team with 3 PhD students, and our research line is focused on the causal mechanisms of arrhythmia, especially atrial fibrillation. We are interested to look at how risk factors induce arrhythmia, and currently we mainly look at the mechanism of metabolic remodeling and calcium homeostasis. To start this, we established 3 models in our lab: the in vitro cardiomyocyte model, in vivo Drosophila model, and our in vivo mouse model. And in these models, we induce arrhythmia by risk factors. Then we measure multiple endpoints, including calcium sparks and calcium transient, and M-mode cardiography, and also the ECG in the mice and the long end of heart. The strength of our models is that we could do genetic manipulation, which really allow us to study the causal mechanisms. And furthermore, when we study our mechanism, we use 3 model systems. So this integrated use of 3 model systems really allow us to provide solid data with high translational potential. Now I would like to draw your attention to this part. Back to 2019, when I was a postdoc in Amsterdam University, Free University Medical Center, we could measure calcium transient, but we could not measure calcium sparks, which are better endpoint for arrhythmogenesis. And this picture is adapted from the paper of Professor Wang, which were published in 2001 in the Nature. I will come back to this point later. That tells why I was interested in the lab. So why I was interested in this lab visit. So it was at that moment, I wanted to learn this technique, very specific technique, how to measure calcium sparks. And we could saw it in our movies, but we could not measure it properly, and we could not quantify it. We don't know the algorithm for the quantification. So that's what what I would like to learn at that moment. So, and luckily, the World Congress provides this bursary for lab visiting, and they have a list of host labs. And I checked the list. Luckily, Professor Wang is on the list. So, and I have read his paper before, and I knew that he's expert in this field. So here is just showing one example that he could even measure the single channel calcium signal. So they could really measure those small signals, and they developed the softwares for quantification. I would not bother you a lot with the details. If you are interested, please read this paper. So that's why I'm really interested in his lab, and I applied, and luckily he is willing to host me. And here is a picture with in 2019, me in the lab of Professor Wang, and in the back is the confocal microscope that they use to measure these little calcium spikes. And so how did this visit benefit my research and career? And of course, first and foremost, I learned the technique within that week, and as well as they share the algorithms with me for quantification. So that's the biggest benefit. And of course, this fostered the new collaborations with Professor Wang. And also, as Jamie also mentioned, I joined their lab activities, and I found talked with the postdocs and PhDs in their lab, and also talked with Professor Wang. I found out that they really have a very big team, a very diverse background, and they could work very efficiently. So I got a lot of inspiration on how to lead a team with diverse backgrounds, which is also, I think, very important soft skill for me now as an early career independent researcher. And furthermore, also, of course, it's good for your CV, and also you have the chance of getting funding, because in the Netherlands, when you apply for funding, they also value the international experience. So this will be good for your CV. And luckily, just 1 year after the visit, I got awarded with a very competitive national research grant, personal grant, which is called VINI, for the early career investigators in the Netherlands. I did not mention here, but it not only benefit my research and career, but that week was really a lot of fun. The nice people and nice food, the Chinese food was really nice. So it was a lot of fun. Just a short summary of the process of my application. First, identified what I want to learn, the technical need at that moment. And I checked the list of the host professors. I know a professor is also actually the founder of the technique of the calcium spikes, Professor Zhang, but his lab is not on the list. But yeah, luckily Professor Wang is on the list. So, so check the whole list and find the professor and their the expertise that you want to learn. Then I contact the professor and ask the possibility for visit, and got the positive response. Then write the application for the bursary, or now called fellowship, and finally get funded. So hopefully you will also be interested and get a fund for the visiting. So finally, I would like to give special thanks to the ISHR committee who made this lab visit possible for grant my application, and for Professor Wang, who was willing to host me, and for the PhD student Li Peng Wang, who guided me the lab and have taught me the technique. And if you have any questions, I will be happy to answer them, or you can email me later. That's it. Thank you.
Cool, thanks, Deli. So last but not least, we have Emma. Emma is currently an AHA postdoc fellow in the University of Colorado, where she's working to uncover novel mechanisms in signaling and also gene regulation in cardiovascular diseases and also related disorders. So she has had extensive international working experiences, including previous positions in the UK, in Belgium, and also in the Netherlands. And so she's here as well to help share some of those experiences with us. Emma?
Just unmute myself. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, excellent. Yes, thank you very much for inviting me today to join this meeting and to talk a little bit about also what I got from short international visits, such as the one funded by the ISHR. So I haven't actually had one of the ISHR travel awards as per the other two speakers, but I have had a few similar awards which were also tagged on to meetings. So I can talk to you about that and echo some of what other people have said about the benefits. So just briefly about my few international visits. So during my PhD, which second half of my PhD I did at KU Leuven in Belgium, I applied for and was successful in getting a European Society of Cardiology funded First Contact Initiative grant. And this was also to fund a sort of a short visit from three weeks to 3 months, I think. And I went for about 1 month to the University of Oslo in Norway. And this particular visit, I was keen, coming to the end of my PhD, to learn a bit more about echocardiography analysis. So we were working on cardiac hypertrophy at the time, and we had great collaborators doing the analysis for us. But thinking about moving on, I wanted to become more independent in that sort of analysis and technique. So I went to the University of Oslo to learn from our collaborators how to do some more intense analysis. And I spent about a month in Oslo in 2017. During my postdoc, which I was then in Maastricht University at the Netherlands, and I was working on biomarkers of HFpEF, particularly long non-coding RNA or long-coding RNA biomarkers, and having had access to some great samples in Europe, some human plasma samples, I also wanted to look at a slightly different population of HFpEF patients, such as is often found in Asia, where they're much leaner, often with hypertension. And so I went to the Genome Institute of Singapore to collaborate with Roger Fu to use some of their samples and cohorts to look at some circulating circular RNAs as markers and as well as functional molecules in HFpEF. And that was funded by a short-term scientific mission, which is a European Commission funded effort called the COST Action. That stands for Cooperation in Science and Technology. And then during the sort of, same postdoc in 2019, I also spent time at the University of Cambridge in the UK on a European Molecular Biology Organization short-term fellowship, which was also for a total of about 6 weeks. And there I was using an excellent biobank of human heart samples they had to do some single nucleus sequencing to delineate different types of heart failure and the transcriptomes. So I had 3 short visits during my PhD and postdoc with similar sorts of grants to the ones the ISHR are offering. To echo a lot of what the previous 2 speakers have said, what I got out of these visits, I didn't mean to start all these sentences with ease, it just turned out that way. So obviously exposure to new techniques and technologies is one of the main reasons you might have one of these visits, expertise that aren't available at your current institution and will enhance your current projects. And I think a really important, again, long-term benefit of these sorts of visits is to be able to experience other mentorship styles, laboratory environments, as well as institute and national ways of how research is organized, which is something that I think we don't always appreciate until we live and work somewhere else. So, for example, in different countries, there's different research structures, different ways in which research is funded, and maybe you're not aware of that until you go to a different country. And then especially thinking about where you might want to start your own laboratory, I think that's really been beneficial for me in deciding where I might finally want to work, as well as experiencing different laboratory environments and mentorship styles. Again, I think long term, this is really important to keep all these things in mind, to think, methods and techniques of running a lab which you may want to take with you and implement later on. Of course, it also extends your network with the collaborators that you go to visit, as well as, ideally with wider network at the university you visit, not just the host laboratory. It's, again, excellent for your CV, especially if you don't have a lot of mobility on your CV. I think these short-term fellowships are excellent ways to get that into your CV, as well as grantsmanship. You're likely to be the one that communicates with the host laboratory and formulates your aims and writes, I imagine, the majority of the fellowship, although hopefully you'll get some input from maybe your current mentor and host lab. But I think that's also a good thing to put on your CV, as well as good experience for you. I think it's also a great way to be able to establish some independence, maybe a bit more or less depending on which stage of your career you're at. So, if you go to visit a host lab, you do work with them. Maybe that becomes more, work that's independent from your current laboratory, depending on what you agree with your mentor. So just to give some examples, I was thinking about outputs from my visits that I've had. Obviously, I've had a few visits, so hopefully it was worth the money of the institute as well as my time. And I've had quite a few papers that resulted from my visits published. And I think actually all of them were independent of my mentor at the time. So my mentor, said, no, you went to visit, you wrote this paper with them, I don't need to be on it. So that's something else, which is also really good for your CV. And that will, again, depend on your level of your career and what kind of work you do. Also, as a result of my visit to Norway, I've kept in touch very much with a collaborator I visited there, and he's now independent scientist. And we actually applied for a grant together, and he's got 2 PhD students currently with him funded by the grant. And hopefully when I start my own laboratory, we'll keep applying for joint funding, and then maybe I'll get some students or people funded by grants we write together. So actually, only when I sat down to prepare this talk did I think about actually long-term implications of some of these short visits. And hopefully there'll be collaborations and contacts I'll maintain for years to come. As I mentioned, some of these visits, I also were tagged on to meetings. So for example, my trip to the United Kingdom to go back to the University of Cambridge was at the same time as the British Society of Cardiovascular Research meeting held in September 2019. And I presented a poster of my work that I was doing back at my home institute, and I won the ISHR postdoc award there. So linking in with the ISHR still. And also actually when I was in Oslo, I was also linked in with a Centre for Heart Failure Research meeting there. So yes, I think really, if you make the most of it, you can really get a lot out of these visits that are really long lasting. And as a lot of other people have said, if you're lucky enough to get funded, definitely give it 100%, dive in, make sure you meet as many people as you can in your own lab, the host lab, as well as the wider institute. It might be other universities around that you wouldn't normally get a chance to visit. So do get in contact with people you think might be helpful to you now or in the future. Make sure if you're not offered it, asked to give lab meetings, give a seminar, and yeah, just try and experience life as you would if you were a usual member of the lab. And I was very lucky to have some great labs and great experiences. Also, I got to be in Norway on Norwegian Day when the King and Queen come out of their palace, which is them here somewhere. When I went to Singapore, the lab very kindly, we did a trip to Malaysia, which I've never been to before. And Cambridge, visited the colleges, had nice dinners. So yeah, again, get stuck in and make sure you meet as many people as you can and get as much experience as you can. And yeah, this is just my current lab. So I moved in October 2020 to the United States, to the University of Colorado to work with Tim McKinsey. This is our lab here, and this is the beautiful view from our 8th floor where we are, with the Rocky Mountains in the background. So do come and visit us if you can. And also, yeah, when the opportunity arises, come and visit us with a similar grant if you would like to. And here's my contact details if you have any more questions about this or anything else.
Cool, thanks, Elmo. So that was our three speakers, and I really like to thank Emma, Deli, and also James for really eloquently, I think, highlighting just the benefits of having a travel bursary or the travel experience. I think if anybody has questions, like we will have some time after we finish this for you to ask and to try to dig at our panelists. But just to follow on from that, and Jim alluded to it like during his talk, we are very fortunate to have a lot of host laboratories. I think at the moment we have 25 who have committed to serve as host laboratories, as we can see on the slides at the moment, hopefully with a huge range of research topics that would fit what everybody wants. And this is not just in Germany itself. If you look at the list, we have universities in Manchester, in Amsterdam, and also in Paris. To get the full list, just scan like the little QR code, and you should get to a Word document that just has the whole list of host laboratories who have committed themselves so far. But as also all our speakers have alluded to, it is not just the current laboratories that have committed to host that are within the purview of who you can visit. So if there is an ISHR affiliated laboratory that you are keen to visit within where the Congress is held, you can try to reach out to them and try to establish a connection. And if they do agree to it as well, that can be considered as a host laboratory too. Erik? Yep.
So just to end, thank you, Keat. The application, we as the ECI committee, because this whole process has been met with so much support from ISHR and the local organizing committee, we've simplified the application form, and it really boils down to you sending us your CV, evidence of communication and agreement with said host lab, and a description of why this fellowship and scholarship might benefit you. This is all on the application form that'll be posted on the website you see here below for the information to visit. And of course, you can contact myself, Keat, or Carolina, who is our secretary of our ECI committee. So the applications will go live, and as we said throughout this webinar today, this will also be sent out via email on February 1st with a tentative application deadline of March 1st, 2022. So we will take questions at the end. There is one last exciting initiative we want to promote, and then that is going to be the second actual ECI special issue in JMCC. So a huge thank you to Rong Tian and the editorial staff for, again, supporting the ECIs and all of our initiatives. The topic of this special issue will be mechanisms of heart failure, insights by the next generation of cardiovascular researchers. You will also see a formal call for proposals go out, with submissions opening on May 1st of this year and the submission deadline of December 31st of this year. So as we started out saying, one of our main goals was to drive collaboration, and especially at the international level, center around the World Congress amongst ECIs. And we thought this was an excellent opportunity to promote just that. And so the topics will either be a review or a short communication. You will see all of this information in the call for proposals, but the stipulations are that all authors must be ISHR ECIs of ECI status, ideally one junior and one senior, that way to promote the more seniors getting that opportunity for corresponding authorships, and of course ECIs getting a primary authorship as well. We would also prefer that it is a collaboration amongst different sections of ISHR. The idea being that these dates here are centered around the World Congress and hopefully attending the World Congress, and maybe you can meet up there with someone in the Australasian section or the European section, the North American section, or any of the sections that you're not a part of. Strike up a common interest and maybe write a little short review on it to submit. All articles will undergo a standard JMCC peer review process, And this is an excellent way for us to help promote the JMCC Junior Reviewer Program, where they actually also have ECIs who get more opportunities to review articles for JMCC. So again, this is all emblematic of the overwhelming support that JMCC and ISHR has for ECIs at our level. So before I turn it over to answer any questions about either the travel bursary program itself, or I'm sorry, the visiting fellowship program from ISHR, or this new ECI special issue in JMCC, we have a few thank yous that we of course want to get to. And one is to Litsa Kranius and Frederic Quayle, who have been our mentors as ECI committee, and their invaluable experience guiding us throughout this process. And we're very excited to hopefully have an in-person conference and a World Congress in June this year, and have some great sessions and some a nice social, and it's all thanks to them and their support and guidance. And as well as the ISHR executive leadership head by Tomas Eschenhagen, Leah Delbridge, and of course, supporting all of them. We couldn't do any of this without Leslie Lobaugh, so thank you to them. And then to JMCC as well, and Rong Tian for supporting these initiatives. And lastly, a huge support for this initiative in particular, the ECI special issue. Some of our editors will be Litsa Kranius and Kika Sekharov. So thank you to them. Without you guys, this would not at all be possible. So with that, we would all be happy to take any questions about the programs themselves, World Congress, ECI events, and of course to our speakers, thank you for being here and sharing your experiences. And hopefully there's questions for you. So one question that was presented earlier in the chat box is that this webinar, as with all the webinars for JMCC, are recorded. They will be posted on YouTube, and they will go out, and the link to that via email after this is complete. So Liana asks, is the visiting fellowship limited to ISHR members only? Yes, it is. And then we are asking that you have also submitted an abstract to the World Congress. Julia asks about the review process for the bursary applications. And so that's going to be sent to the ECI committee. All of us on the committee will review the applications, assuming that the host lab has agreed and signed the application as well. They'll be reviewed on a merit basis, depending upon how many spots we have funded by ISHR. And then Litsa says, great session. Thank you, Litsa. Thank you for being here.
I think maybe to add to that as well, in terms of the evaluation, given that the ECI committee is the ones who would be evaluating it, like we would obviously try to be as transparent as possible in terms of how we come about doing the evaluations, and whether or not that's disseminating the criteria by which we do these evaluations by email, or however we could try to tell everybody how we do that. We will try to do that as well as we can.
Yes, Kat, thank you for pointing that out. So as of before February 1st, that website will be updated with this current information, as well as a link to this host lab and the application form. So as we wait, and maybe a couple minutes left, I'll just go ahead and sell some more plugs. We're really thankful to have the local organizing committee for the World Congress, head by Dr. Burkhard Piest, who's extremely excited for especially the ECI events. I think he's going to try to sneak his way into the social, which will be great to have him there. He's meeting the travel bursary program with overwhelming support. So look for that list of host labs to actually grow in the next couple of weeks from people from his institute. So it is nice. And if you haven't received Leah Delbridge's email with the survey, please again, let any of us know. We can forward it to you to see, just to make sure how much support there is for submitting abstracts and attending the World Congress. Well, I think that might do it. Thank you everyone for attending and asking the questions that you did ask. As you can tell, we're all very enthusiastic about this upcoming World Congress and the events we're promoting today. A huge thank you to Jim, Deli, and Emma for being here today and promote all of these activities. And we look forward to hopefully seeing all of you in person in June. Feel free to reach out to Keat, myself, or Leslie with further questions. And again, this will be recorded and posted. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.